talk everything infection prevention before we get started with the other two items.
You want me to say for next week? It'll be a little bit details. Or I can do it. It doesn't matter. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think I met most of you. Today, well, actually last week, I was invited to be infection prevention. I guess we have a 5-minute infection prevention moment with each clinical effectiveness. And one of the things that I want to speak to you about is the hand hygiene monitoring that we're doing through direct observation. We're finding that it's always a last minute, end of the month, because we asked that our data be entered into TST at the end of the month. And we're finding that it's being entered like on the 29th, the 30th, the 31st, depending on the month. And some of the data that we are getting, we know it's not true. In other words, if you have a national rate of 40 to 55%, there is no way that we have units that are at 100%. So we understand we all want to look good, definitely, but this is something that we need to be transparent on, because we need to make sure that we have good hand hygiene practices, and that's with everyone. That's including EVS, the nurses, the techs, dietary, anyone that has any involvement or are part of care for our patients. We need to make sure that we are monitoring them too. So even though it may not let our rates look good on TST, we really need to do something to change that, because we're finding 100% for, I would say, 70 to 80% of the floors that we have in our project, which there's approximately 40 areas. So if you have 80%, that's like between 90 and 100%. We know that's not true, given what the national average is. And in addition to that, we also have observations that we do quarterly as infection prevention, and our rates are between 40 and 60%. So that's just something that I wanted to discuss with everyone today, and we want to switch ownership of hand hygiene to nursing, because we do understand that's part of your nursing matrix, but we want to continue to have oversight. So does anyone have any questions about that, or something that we can do better as infection prevention department to make it easier or be more help to everyone? Anybody have anything on that? It's okay, I'll be here next week. All right. Did somebody? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Are we still using the videos that we were training our coaches and our observers on how to do that correctly?
Yes. So Joy Ireland is the IP that has the oversight, along with myself, over TST. And I will tell you that we have sent emails to those that have managers and directors and CSLs who have requested for their staff to be in the TST system. We send emails and we can see who's watched the video and who has not, if they've actually clicked on it. Now, when they complete it, they should send a certificate to their assigned IP, which when I get back to my desk, I will send out a new list of who's assigned to what area, so you can know who to reach out to. Because we do know there are some that have not completed the videos, even though we've signed them up.
So will this process change when we go from Joint Commission to DMV?
Okay, so that's another piece of hand hygiene, because when we are with DNV, we do not know how long we'll be able to be in the TST database, because it is ran by Joint Commission. They own it. So we don't know if we're going to get kicked out yet. So for right now, we're continuing to use that database. But if something were to happen, Pam Gordon told us this morning in the Infection Prevention Committee meeting that DNV has a database. So we probably will see a switch from that.
So right now we'll just continue to have our staff that want to be observers.
Yes.
Watch the video and get the certificate.
Yes, and send it to their assigned IP so we can put it down in our records of who has had training and who has not.
Okay.
Yeah. Have I taken up my 5 minutes yet? Okay, so I wanted to just briefly talk about our best practice advisory that we have for our physicians now. I believe Ted and Angie sent out an email maybe the month of December around the 15th, and it kind of revolves around the physicians putting in the order for C. diff testing. And some of the reasons why we have went to that and why nurses are unable to do it, because C. diff testing is not an emergency. If you see someone that's having loose stools, and usually it's someone who's had at least 3 loose stools, then you can go ahead as a nurse and put them on C. diff isolation. We are the only ones who can take them off of isolation, but you can put them on isolation without having a C. diff test done. When we come in or when the physician comes in and they warrant that there's testing that needs to be done, it's very important that when that C. diff testing is ordered, that you get a specimen right then and there. Because what happens is when you print those labels are printed and it goes straight to SunQuest and it sits there for about 3 days, 72 hours, you can't cancel it. So that's a practice that we've noticed. And what happens at the end of the month when we're doing C. diff and MRSA lab ID events for NHSN, which counts against us, we have no idea of knowing, other than we know that you can't do it every 14 days, of what was actually ran and what actually was not, because it comes on a report for us. So it'd be very hard for us to go through all of those to determine if C. diff testing was truly done. And that would be the same for the blood cultures. If the doctor orders a blood culture and say, for instance, I hit print lab, but I don't get that lab, it falls off the task list for the incoming nurse. So if you're on night shift, your day shift nurse will not see it unless you give them a verbal report. So you need to make sure that when you're doing blood cultures or C. diff testing, that you are not printing the labels unless you have the specimen. Any questions? All righty.
To kind of backfill on that, there should be no stat C. diff test done at night. It's really important that we're not putting in verbal orders or telephone orders for those C. diff tests. Like she said, you guys can put them on the precaution and let the physicians come in the next day and write their own order. There's no reason to have an emergent order for that.
And also, it was asked by the physician leadership to, also, it's very important to document stools appropriately and as closely as possible so we can monitor to make sure that the patient is having those 3 liquid stools before we place the order. As well as if they're ordered on admission, make sure that we're collecting it ASAP when they arrive, and if it's a delay in collecting the stool, then we probably need to question, is it really necessary to test the C. diff on admission?
Questions, concerns, comments? Nothing? Okay. Well, we'll see Tamara every week. Thank you.
Sally?
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Just a few housekeeping things. If we have run out of papers, the handouts, I have some down here. Does anyone need any? Yeah, I see some in the back. Thanks. A few other things, just some background. For those that don't know me, I'm Shiley Harper. I work at Erlanger. I've been here for about 4 years. My background education is in monetary economics and finance, so economic growth models, finance, and I have a master's degree from UTK. So please let me explain to you that this is hard. So if it's hard for me, I understand that it's hard for you. So please do not feel embarrassed to ask questions or concerns. Second, this is the very, very beginner class, so please just be thoughtful about this. This is for the very brand new employee who just came here, never worked in as a CSL or nurse manager. this class is really designed for them. So if you have, 5 years, 6 years of budgeting experience, finance experience, this class may not be the best use of your time. The other thing is that this class will be an ongoing series. There'll be more classes after this with different topics, but this class will always be taught. Cindy is my timekeeper. Where are you, Cindy? So, okay, great. I can see you. So make sure that I stay on time. Don't run late because the RN comp model is coming up next. So that's important. So today we have just 3 basic objectives for this class. One is, why is finance and budgeting important in a hospital setting? I know it's kind of a difficult patient care stuff. It's more important. So I get that. 2, it's just the basic terminology that you will hear finance or accounting throw around. Probably need to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. And then finally, there is a report of steps on how to find your reports in Report Manager, because that has changed. And it's hard for me too. So when things change, I don't know how the steps are to go through there. So at a very macro level, can anybody tell me why finance might be important for us in the hospital system? Ideas, thoughts? Are we going to be quiet this morning? Bill, do I need you to start passing out candy for me? Yeah, go ahead.
Steward of your finances.
Yep. So there, from a very high level, the importance of budget and finance are, it allows us to invest in research, equipment, our associates, and really the community. We're on tap this year to provide $120 million in charity care. That is astronomical. So pay raises, I always like that. So that's it, you see, my important benefit plans. We actually have a very generous benefit plans. I've worked at other facilities. You can only carry over maybe like 5 days of PTO a year. You use it or lose it. They don't do buyback. So very nice, generous plan. Equipment. We need more bladder scanners. Yes, I know. So being profitable allows us to invest in the infrastructure to deliver high quality care. So I'm going to drill down a little bit about why this is important for you. Is if we do not get your budget right, we will not be able to provide you with the right mix of staff that you need to take care of your patients, right? Technology and equipment. Am I going too fast? Yes, no? I'll look to Cindy. Oh, good, okay. And lower stress levels, right? How many people will tell me that they are understaffed or don't have the right hours of care and they are stressing their staff out? We're running them too many patients to a nurse, too much time, it stresses people out. So this is a real life, and this is, 6121. Where are my people for 6121? This is a real life, this year, what happens when budgeting goes wrong. So can anybody tell me, we have like 800 cost centers, right? And 800 lines in a cost center. This is one line out of millions of cost center lines, and it's patient supplies. So patient supplies can be articulated like this. For every one patient, I spend $121.54 in supplies for that patient, right? Makes sense? Anybody tell me what looks wrong in this graph? So in 2016, they went from 121 to 80. 2017, they were down to $78. And this year, they were down to $38 per patient supplies in an ICU. Does that seem odd? Ted, did you just reinvent the wheel and save me a ton of money? Right? Does
Back in the
anybody
day,
know
you
what's
used to
wrong with
clean your own
this?
needles.
Not charging the patient, yeah. Is this reasonable? This is a typo. This is absolutely a typo. Either myself, accounting, yeah, hand out candy. Linda's like, I didn't answer. It was her behind her. So, does anybody know, now that this mistake has been made, where this money is going to show up? Where's this mistake going to show up that somebody's going to say, why am I doing $38 for patient supplies in an ICU? When it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. In your variance report, good job. It will absolutely show up in your variance report. Do you know what's going to happen on his variance report? Anybody know? It's going to look like he is over budget, like significantly over budget. Is he over budget? Nah, not really. Based on the budget he is, but he really isn't. So if you take out your handouts, on the first page, there's a budget challenge. So as you can see, I circled the $38, which was clearly a mistake. Ted did not somehow mysteriously cut his expenses for a patient's 50%. And it will show up on your variance because that $38, I'm going to take that by how many stats you have, or how many patient days, or OR minutes, or patient visits, and I'm going to multiply those two. That's going to tell me what I thought you should have spent. So in this case, we thought he was going to spend $121,000. Sorry, he spent $264. Ted and I got to go before, Rob Brooks and Britt Tabor and say, we made a mistake. Sorry. Wasn't a fun experience. So that's how you can tell what your flex budget is. It's important to look at your stats, like patient supplies. So if I was to conversely say, let's go back. What if I gave Ted $100 there? So if I instead of giving him $38, I decided for every patient supply he should spend $100. Would he be under his budgeted or over if he spent $262? I see some looks, so let me back up. So instead of giving him $38, I put his patient supply stat at 100. I'm going to multiply that by 3,157, and that's going to give me a budget of $351,000. But he spent only $262. So he looks like he's doing really good, right? Doing really good. Good job, Ted. Does anybody know why that's a problem? Well, maybe that money could have been used for a different department. Maybe we should have budgeted the other money to Angie's cost center. So it can go either way. Does anybody have some questions about that? I've included the math for everybody. So yeah, when your budget goes wrong, it goes really wrong. So it's really important for us as we're going into budget season to make sure that all of our items are correct. Otherwise, it will show up somewhere like a variance report. Or we're not giving Jill Stillman enough, budget dollars that she needs to be effective, right? All right, so we've kind of covered the first one. The objectives, obviously, right? It's good for our patients. It's good for our department. We're good stewards of our money. Making sure that Angie gets enough, Ted gets enough, Jill gets enough. We're not over budgeting or under budgeting. So the next piece, any questions about that? No, yes, no. I see some looks. So if you have questions about this and this is not the appropriate venue that you feel comfortable asking, please send me an email afterwards. I promise you there's nobody getting a grade here except for me. Terminology. This is very, very basic terminology. This is not budget finance, but I just want to make sure we're all speaking the same language. Inpatient. Can anybody tell me what an inpatient is? You get candy.
Somebody that's here more than 23 hours.
Yes. It's driven by a physician order. Outpatient, we get a lot of outpatients in our practices, in our OR, right? They're here for treatment, but they're not technically admitted to the hospital. OBS patients, right? We all love the OBS patients. This will be taught in a later class, but does anybody know how to change OBS hours into patient days? Does anybody know the math formula for that? Okay. So I'm going to assume Linda's here for 10 hours for OBS. You're here for 10 hours. You're here for 10 hours. You're here for 10 hours, and you're for 8 for today. I'm going to add all those up and divide by 24 to turn that into a patient day. 48 divided by 24 is 2. So you will get 2 patient days for that. So you just add all your OBS hours up for that day and divide it by 24 to turn it into a patient day. Not everybody has OBS, so I understand that, but it does get confusing for those who do. Midnight census. Anybody know what midnight census is? Butts in beds at midnight, yeah. I'm not sure we're allowed to say that anymore. I think they've changed that, right? It's not polite. But I know what you're saying.
Actually, not at midnight now either. I think it's 11.
Is it really 11 now?
I think it was at Epic.
Why would they change it to 11? That's a weird hour.
Oh, maybe. Maybe. I don't know, I heard that.
Hold on. We have a question. Tracy, you want to?
I just said we needed to clarify that because there's a big difference between 11 and 12.
What's
I mean,
the
you
big
may
difference?
get 10 admissions between 11 and 12, especially with the way we have late discharges and cleaning.
Do you know why you count at 12 and not 11? Or is it just that you set a time for the hospital?
I mean, my understanding is that's a new day. 12:01 is a new day. It's the start of that's when the calendar rolls over.
That's why I've always heard midnight census is because of that. But I didn't know we were counting at 11.
Yeah, so I just think we need to clarify that on what,
We can clarify it.
Yeah, maybe it needs to be 11 o'clock census. I don't know. Okay.
it's going to be different.
Epic
There's going to
does
be a
it.
difference between, on my units, there's going to be a difference, I can tell you that, usually.
Yeah. Well, most of them now. Everybody turns their beds over at night now, so. 11
Okay.
o'clock discharge.
Question, Lynn? All right, so we're going to get into some definitions that are more finance-y related. So just want to make sure that we talk about some of the other ones. Cost center. Cost center is a unit department here where we accumulate expenses. It does not always mean that there is revenue tied to those expenses. Think about my accounting department. They do not generate any revenue. They are purely a cost center. They're just an expense. Dave's area, he's got a department, cost center, but it does generate revenue and expense. So it's just a department or a unit that generates cost or expenses. IT, great example. They do not generate revenue. They don't bring patients in. They don't see patients. They're an expense. Fixed budget. So this is projected levels of your volume. So you're going to have 400 OR cases or 300 patients. Your expenses, I'm going to have $100,000 in expenses this year. And your revenue, I'm going to get, if you do have revenue, some places don't, I'm going to get $300,000 in revenue. It's a point-in-time projection. So, true story, happened on a lovely Friday afternoon in the fall at Blue Ridge, Georgia. We had a department who's, we'll call it Unit A. So they had submitted a budget. Part of this is true, part of this is dramatized. They had a budget, said they were going to have $300,000 in revenue, $100,000 in expense. and 1,000 patient days. Their pipe burst on their floor and flooded the floor. And it flooded it for knee deep. Let's pretend in this story that the department was closed for 6 months. Is that budget, fixed budget, going to be useful? Do you think they're going to get all the stats, all the money? No. It is just a point in time projection. Real life things change that would change your outcomes. Questions? Flex budget. Does anybody know what your flex budget is? No. Yes? I'm going to come back here, start picking on people. Linda, what is your flex budget? Look, there's a reason.
I don't know. It's the one that shifts and moves. It varies.
Yep, it varies based on your volume. It goes up or down. It's usually a retrospective look at the end of your month. Capital budget. We're getting ready to go into capital budget planning. This is for equipment that has a lifetime of greater than 1. It's useful, and it's $2,500. So any equipment that is greater than $2,500 and expected to last for longer than a year is considered capital here. Not Shiley. That's just the Erlanger limit. Revenue. I love this one. Revenue. Because it gets me wrapped around it. You think that's the money that you get, right? Here our revenue is actually billed charges. Don't know why, but it confuses me. So I think revenue, I think that's the money I'm going to get. But generally it is. It's actual dollars received. But here, when we look at our variance report, revenue is actually billed charges, not money that we received. Yeah, Lynn, you're shaking your head. Is that weird to you? Yeah, very. Yeah, it's bizarre. If you want to try to figure out, and here's some quick math about how much you're going to get paid for that, multiply your revenue by 0.3. That'll give you your payment amount, roughly. Roughly. Expenses, costs or supplies. And expenses really generally fall into 2, direct expense and indirect expense. Can anybody guess what I am? Am I a direct expense or an indirect expense? Oh, I'm indirect. I don't provide any revenue. Accounting, IT, water, utilities, indirect expenses. Rent. You know, we charge rent here, believe it or not, by square footage. So bigger your unit, the more the rent expense. Somebody has to pay for the upkeep of the building, right? Rent expenses are the way to do that. Questions? Okay. So activity time, because talking and writing are 2 different things. You have a second sheet on there. I'll give you about 5 minutes to fill out, thank you, Lisa, for this idea. What is the definitions, some of those definitions? I also provided a nice little handout behind that to help you fill out those definitions. I see some of you have been filling out as you go along.
Gail did clarify. They dropped charges at midnight. I don't know why I heard differently. Clarification. Thanks for setting me straight.
questions? Anybody have questions? We have kind of a tight budget, a tight schedule today. Speaking budgets. All right. So I'm going to dive a little bit more into some terminology. And these are important ones. Stat. Can anybody define stat? Does anybody know what a stat is? It's not on your sheets. I can print some out extra. It's a specific unit of measurement for a department. Lisa, what's your stat for surgical hours? Linda, what's your stat?
You're asking me way too much too early. That's
Okay.
fine. I can give you the number, but, you know.
Lynn, what's your stat? What's your patient stat? No, patient days. Joanna? No, actually, you're on here because,
Good answer.
okay. Well, it's definitely not me. I'm just giving whatever Joe's giving me. So let me explain to you, because I often get this question, so do not feel bad if you do not know how to answer this. What is my stat and where do I find it? Okay. If you were to ask me what Tracy's stat is for 6191, I could probably guess some of it, but she's got procedures, observation days, and patient days. I had no idea, and I'm in budgeting and finance. Neurotrauma, patient and obs days. Your stat is on the variance report, and it's roughly, and it depends on how many lines you have, roughly in the 20-ish area. Don't feel bad if you don't know the answer. That will tell you what your stat is, your unit of measurement for your department, and they all are different. For those of you in the back who do not have a stat because you're a fixed department like my infection prevention department, you will not have a stat. This is only for my flex departments, my physician practices, my ORs, generally not cost centers like myself. Worked hours of stat. So Shiley worked 10 hours today, and I saw 5 patients. I'm going to get a worked hours per 2. The formula is total hours divided by whatever your respective stat is. Too much? No? Yes? Paid. Does anybody know what's included in your paid hours of stat? Orientation. Right. Education. PTO. Short-term disability. So in this example, Shiley took 6 hours of PTO that morning. I worked 6 hours, and I saw 3 patients. So I'm going to get a paid of 4. You're still paying me for all 12 hours, right? So it's all that time that people are there, but are not in direct patient care. Okay, so on your handout, I have included the 4 most likely scenarios I get asked all the time about my hours of care. So scenario 1, and I've done the math for you, so you can work it through with me. So I don't expect you to be mathematicians. I need more staff. If I add more staff, anybody have any idea what's going to happen to my hours of care? No, yes. Sometimes it does, yeah. So generally, if all things else are the same and my stats don't change and I add more workers, my hours of care are going to go up. So in this first example, we're adding 2 RNs. right? Unit A needs 2 additional RNs. So you can see in the initial, they had a stat of 13.65. That's the one at the top. So every employee works 37.5 hours. Well, this is my math, so I'm trying to make it easy. In 52 weeks, so the total hours for every employee roughly is 1950. So you're going to add up all of your employees at 1950 and divide it by how many stats you have. So when you add up additional FTEs at that top line, you're going to get a larger outcome. We will have classes just specifically for this, so don't think you need to do the math right now. It's just, this is a helpful guide. Okay, second one I get asked is scenario 2. Is what happens when I need to combine staff or delete staff? So I often get asked the question, I'd like to change 2 LPNs for 1 RN or 2 PCTs for 1 RN, right? It's budget neutral, so I'm not going to, 2 PCTs equal to 1 RN roughly, right? Do you know what happens to your hours of care when you do this? It does the opposite. Because now you're taking hours at that top line and removing it. So when you combine staff or you delete FTEs, your hours of care are going to go down. A lot of people don't realize that. It's okay if you don't know the math, because we will have a class specifically on hours of care and staffing. But generally, when you combine or delete staff, your hours of care are going to drop. What happens when I'm short-staffed for a long time? Whitney should know this question, right? Whitney, how long have you been short-staffed in the ED?
For a very long time.
For a very long time. What do you think is going to happen to her hours of care? It's going to drop too. So it's going to have the same impact as if you had deleted FTEs. So when budget season comes, I'm going to have to push her hours of care back up, right, for budget. If I were to drop it to what she's run, I'm cutting her staff. Inadvertently, but I'm cutting your staff, right? You want those hours of care back, don't you? You sure do. Actually, true story, there is a department here, I think, that had this issue and nobody caught it, so they cut their hours of care to the lesser of the two, the budget or the actual, and now I have to fight to get back those hours of care. So what happens in scenario 4 is I don't flex. I got 35 beds, I always staff 7 nurses. But my patients, they all dried up. This happens all, if you do not flex, you just staff, I've got 35 beds, need 7 nurses, but you only got 2 patients. What are you going to do to your hours of care? You are going to drive that through the roof. Your productivity will go down, 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 down. Yeah. It has the same impact as if you added staff. These are the 4 most likely scenarios I get asked every day. That's why that sheet's there. If you need help figuring out the math, we will have a class on that. But generally, if you do not flex down and your patient volume drops, it has the same impact as if you added a whole bunch of staff. And does anybody know where that will show up when you do that? Oh, it'll show up in your variance. It'll show up in your productivity too. Your productivity will tank. Okay. Variance reports. I will show you instructions on how to find your variance report. If you, after this class, go back, please try to find your variance reports. I need you to make sure that you can pull them, that you have the right cost centers, departments, that you're able to pull them and drill down. Drill down means you click on the button, push add-ins, drill down. If you do not have that function, please send me your name and computer number. I have a personal IT person that is working with me to correct some of this. His name is Jack Bentley, by the way, if you want to email him. Variance department reports. So, does anybody know what variance means? Just difference. It just means the difference. So, variance reports come out monthly. They are in your monthly report folder. So, the one question that I get asked, and I still mess this up all the time, is when is a negative variance a good thing on my variance report, right? That sounds weird, doesn't it? When is negative good? I don't know. When is positive bad? Because it does matter on your variance report. It does. It's very confusing, for me at least. There is 2 sections to your variance report. There's a revenue section and an expense, and they are 2 separate different items. So when your variance report shows a positive rate, so if it shows this, rate efficiency variance or year, as bad, negative, with a negative sign, that's bad. That's bad variance. If your rate efficiency is positive, it's good variance. So revenue, positive, good, revenue, negative, bad. It works exactly the opposite on the expense side, and that confuses me every single time. So that's why I've included those in your slide. So if my rate efficiency for expenses, patient supplies, is negative, that's good. It means I spent less than I should have. I don't know why they do it. I wish there was some easier way to explain this. But if my rate variance and expenses is positive, that's bad. That means I've overspent. I put together a very helpful chart. I use it. Because I'm a visual person. So I have my good variance on the left and my bad variance on the right. If I'm in my revenue section and the number is positive, that's good. If I'm in my expense section and my variance is negative, that's bad. I know, I'm not sure why they convey, like I see you shaking your head, you're with me, it's like, oh, that is so confusing sometimes. Yeah, sometimes I'll read the negative variance on the expense side and be like, oh, they overspent. But no, it means you've underspent. Gets me every time. Gets me every time. Okay. Like we talked about earlier, what is defined as your revenue? It is billed charges, patient charges. It is not the money that you are getting. It is funny money. Funny money. It is not payments. Does anybody remember what I said? How you can turn that revenue into an idea of what you're going to get payment-wise? 0.3. Multiply by 0.3. You're going to get about 30% reimbursement on what we bill. It's not a lot of money. No, not a lot at all. All right, so we've covered some basic terminology related to finance. This next section is really, really super easy. Cindy, how am I doing on time? Okay, great. I can cover this in 15 minutes. This is step-by-step instructions for where to find your reports, because I never got one of these when I was here. So I'm not sure how I figured this out except for the sit with Susie method. Generally don't like that. It's helpful sometimes, but if Susie's not a good employee, you're not going to be helped, are you? Okay. Everybody knows where the intranet homepage is, right? You can find it. On the right side, there is this lovely section that says Employee and Manager Links. You are going to want to click on your manager link. It will open up a big, long page. Somewhere halfway down the middle is Finance and Supply charges, or chain, sorry. You're going to want to click that link. And then you're going to come to a landing page that looks like this. You're going to have to give all sorts of information, your child's firstborn information, date of birth. Now, this one's weird because your username is in all caps for this one. Catches me every single time. Not sure why. Does anybody know if you get locked out of this, who to call? Don't call Atos. Lloyd. Does everybody have Lloyd's phone number? Yes. 4790. He'll love it if you call him. We can all call him today, right? Send him lots of emails. Okay. So once you get in there, you're going to come to a landing page that may look similar to this. Some people have more boxes. Some people have less. I only have one. Not sure why. So my box may look a little bit different. What you need to do is go right here to my asset management and click on it. It'll drop down. For this one, to find your variance and your reports, my PeopleSoft inquiry. I'll be sending this PowerPoint out after this, so you do not need to print all this off. And this will be recorded as well. So you don't need to be scribbling notes. Sorry. When you hit My PeopleSoft Inquiry, you should have a box that looks like that, called Reporting Tools. If you do not, please call me. We will fix that. There are some people that are still on the old system, and they will not have a landing screen or anything that looks like this. If you do not, please let me know. Yeah, where on the old, yeah. Yeah, some of us have that function, some of us do not. So I'm not sure where they are in the new rollout or how that gets, installed.
Can you repeat the comment?
I'm sorry,
Repeat
what?
the comment for the satellite.
You what?
Repeat the comment for the satellite campuses.
Oh, yeah. For my satellite facilities, Bledsoe, Sequatchie, I'll see you this afternoon. Murphy, we have some time, and in East, we have some time coming up on Monday. The question is, what happens when we have both? So that is still possible. You could have both the old view and the new view. It's kind of weird. But if you only have the old view, please let me know. I will help you get the installed new view. So I'm going to click on this button. Think of that as a big button, Reporting Tools. It is going to open up this screen right here, and I am going to want to click the Explorer tab in that view to pull my reports. When you open your reports, you will have monthly, biweekly, yearly, and probably several others depending on how big your department is. I only have one cost center, so mine is fairly small. In order to open up your reports, you're going to need to click the plus sign. Your monthly reports are where you will find your variance reports. Biweekly is your productivity reports. I also suggest you look at your payroll reports. Does anybody know why? True story. Didn't happen at this hospital. So I had a director who was moving his respiratory therapists who were stationed in the ED all of their hours of care to the ER. The ER director did not know that. The ER director was on a performance improvement plan because she could not meet her productivity. She was not meeting her productivity because she was eating the cost of 3 FTEs that somebody was floating to her cost department. Yes. It also can happen because somebody accidentally sends the person to the wrong cost center. So you can also, that does happen. So it's important from time to time to look at your payroll to make sure that I didn't go to Lisa Fitzsimmons cost center. You can't, you wouldn't want that. It does happen. It's fairly easy. We have a ton of cost centers here. So reports. Reports are loaded by accounting. They're not loaded by me. They're loaded by accounting and pushed out to you. If you are not getting your reports, please let someone in accounting know. We have a new accounting person. Her name is Pam. But Lenny Bird or Candace Martin can help you until the new accounting manager gets up and running. She's been here for a week, I think. So I think we've covered all topics today. We will have some upcoming classes on staffing to volume, right? What did I say? If you've always staffed 7 RNs because you have 35 beds, but you only got 2 patients, we're going to do some worksheets, game playing around that. Productivity, how to build a cost center, how many FTEs do you really need? Other questions, concerns? Is this a good use of your time or not a good use of your time? Okay. So there will be a survey that comes out after this class. It's important for me to get feedback to help you and help each other. So feel free to be very candid. It does not hurt my opinion. I'm not a teacher by trade. So just like sometimes people make bad food, sometimes I make a bad class. So it happens. I did bring candy. So there's candy in the back. So these are some of the other topics. Troubleshooting. I love this one. This will be a fun class of like, how do I know when something's wrong? I tell you, if your variance is, if your productivity is running at 200%, something's wrong. That's a good rule of thumb. All right, Cindy, do you want my pointer? Do you want this?
No.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Teresa, I know you're on the line, and I just want to make sure that you get with Jan and I so we can work with Murphy directly. So if you can let us know what time's available to you, we'll get back and get you all part of this as well. I was asked because you all have received the scoring sheet. And we'll go through this in a few minutes. What I want to do is just take a minute to go through a few pieces of this. Again, we moved to a pay-for-performance model. This is the scoring sheet, and it's hard to see on here that you're presently working to fill out. I did talk to Charlene, and she has not given me a specific date in which you will be turning into HR the new levels for your staff. Supposedly there's been a change in personnel in HR, and the person that had the old spreadsheet they can't find. So they're having to create. So what you've received in the past, the one that had where you put whether a person had a BSN, what they were, what they are, et cetera, and she's having to create something. So. Yes, Tracy?
Would it be helpful if we sent her back what we had last year? Because there shouldn't, I mean, at least some of the people will be the same. I don't know if she's having to totally recreate it. I'm just thinking on her
That's a
end.
good question. I'll talk to her and find out. I don't
Because, I mean, we all have our old cost centers.
Okay. Hopefully, okay, I'll talk to her and see where she is and creating it. But anyways, I wanted everyone to know that she should be sending it out, but it won't look, because originally I thought it was going to look the same, but she's had to recreate it. Anyways, on the scoring sheet, just a few points on it. Yes, I know it wigged out some people that there were already numbers in the spreadsheet, and that's something that I'll have to, where'd Shiley go?
I'm right here.
Oh. Next time when we clean up the score sheet, we need to take off the numbers if we can. It kind of wigged out some people that it was in there. You see how you already have the numbers already in? I don't know if we can clean it up. But anyways, don't worry about it. We're still working on the score sheet. It was a challenge to get all the scores set up to pre-populate. Anyways, so they presently have it, just disregard. What you're going to do is just click on the row itself, and then it has the drop down, and you'll select 1 through 4 on there. Yes, there are no zeros. We should not have any zeros. Everyone should be able to accomplish a level 1, and then we'll go through the definitions on a level 1. But a level 1 is a person, I'll just click through this real quick. As you can see, a level 1 is a person that can identify and seek. So when you're talking to staff, they should be able to articulate to you how they could or would or should be able to accomplish that checkbox on that matrix. So everyone should be at least a level 1. Should be no zeros if they can at least talk about it. And everyone, even a new nurse coming in, should be able to talk through a process. Okay, the red quality lines, I'm sorry, flipping back and forth. These red ones, there are 7 of them, and those are the quality metrics, okay? For this scoring period and this scoring period only, we decided to block them and not have them into account. There was a lot of discussion on that in regards to the fact that we switched in July to Press Ganey. We had some difficulty getting scores. When we had difficulties getting scores, we could not post them for staff. I mean, if we expect staff to help us improve, we have to give them the data to do such. And it costs 40% of the score. And if areas were not making improvement, it could really put someone down to a level 2. So we felt in the best interest, even though these are the quality metrics we've been working on for a long time, we felt it was more appropriate to take them off for this scoring period, but they will be in full force for next January. The scores automatically calculate. You don't have to worry about that. You just put those scores in. And then also there are the green sections on the scorecard. You don't have to worry about those. I probably should have removed that whole line. These scores are independent of one another. They are weighted independently, so it is not based on the cumulative final score that is there. So you don't have to take this for this one to be add this and put a 7 here. It'll allow you to do it, but it will not impact the score at all. So for those that have to have a closure to that, go ahead and do it, but it won't change the scoring from it. Okay. Just as a reminder, these are the ranges that is on the document itself. I think it's on the back of the first page. It's on that second page. And yes, I have numbered the pages for the next one that will be coming out soon. But these are the ranges. They will remain the same. And then, again, this is for the evaluation process of what it means to be a level 1, 2, 3, or 4. So it's based on that novice to expert spender model. So again, everyone should be able to accomplish level 1 because they should be able to, through discussion with the CSL or the director manager, to be able to tell you what that is. Okay. I probably should. Okay. And remember, our matrix is based on the 5 core competencies. That's what the sections are in the matrix. And these, again, are the 7 quality, but just as a reminder, again, these we are not doing for this scoring for this period. When I sent you out the scoring sheet, there's 2 tabs at the bottom. You choose the one to complete that says without quality scores, but you do have the option to play with it. We did include the one that has the weighted 40%, so you can see here with the scores, because if you put in a number, it will change the score at the bottom. Okay, so you can play with it. So you can take it back to your staff and say, okay, this is what your score is at a 2.74. I can't do it on this one because we blocked those. But you can see if I put in, let's see if I put all 2s. I meant it would help if I tell you what it was. 4.26. And I change all these to 2. I'll leave that as a 1. That's a 2. That's a 2. 4.11, so it does drop it. So if you have a lot more, and then you can get zeros, well, you should be able to get zeros in here. We'll have to fix that for next time. Because if you don't meet your threshold, it is a 0. So, yeah, we'll have to fix that for next time, Shiley.
Yeah, I can add that.
Okay.
Do you want me to take out the green lines too, please?
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. All right. So anyways, those are the 7 quality metrics that we will be doing. Again, we do start over now. I am still making final changes after meeting with a number of people and groups, and I thank those that either came or sent staff to come. We brought a lot of changes and some clarification to the different sections. The main thing is when you're talking with your staff that, again, this is about nursing engagement and nursing accountability. So they need to take the responsibility. No longer is this a chore for the CSLs or the managers to sit there and rate the individual. They should be given the document, as even though as big and intensive it is, they need to be the ones that are identifying the things that need improvement on the unit. We shouldn't be just telling them, now you've gave this opportunity, you should tell them, well, here, this is an audit, or you can do whatever. They should be coming to you now and identifying those things. This is all about them making and seeing instead of being given everything and spoon-fed. They're supposed to be helping us achieve quality outcomes and improvements within our department, within our service line, within nursing in general. And then acting on these assessments by working on things, you know. Yes, Lynn? Wait a minute.
If they're at a level 1 and we do this and we find that they're at a level 2, when did they get that increased pay?
Now, I understand from Charlene that a person, typically all the new grads or the new are coming in as level 1s. There's an automatic allowment after 6 months because every nurse now is getting a 6-month evaluation. Previously, you remember if someone was a tech in another department and then was hired and then transferred into your department as a new grad, a new nurse, they were never required to have a 6-month eval. Now we're saying every new nurse at 6 months will get an evaluation. During that time and you're meeting and going through their orientation checklist, how they're doing, if they're meeting the matrix at a level 2, and there's a possibility that they could do that based, again, the matrix is based on an engagement and how they're interacting with your department and so forth, they can be moved to a level 2 at that time, but it has to be with a valid documentation through the matrix that's submitted to HR at 6 months.
And is it done through a PSN?
Yes, do a PSN. Okay, and that's something new that they started this July. So those that want to go through their department to make sure that your level 1s appropriately, if they meet the criteria for level 2, you can go ahead and change those. Okay, anyone else, you could have a nurse that's been in the department for 3 years and, they went through last year's matrix and, whatever. No, you can't. They would have to wait until this time frame. But those that were level 1s that were missed or whatever, you can look at doing that now. Okay, but we're not talking about a nurse that's been 5, 10 years in your department and is doing the same. Okay. But again, all of this is based on the engagement. And I will say, walking around different departments, I've seen a lot of the matrix papers sticking around. So they are actively involved in it, which is a good thing. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to kind of get them going. But now, again, it was easier this first time around. Like I said, well, they'll come to you and say, well, I've got to do a hand hygiene audit. Well, we only need 20 of those audits entered into the system. We do not want more than 20 entered, but it doesn't mean other people can't do audits and do other things with that. So yes, you might have 40 audits done, but only 20 get entered. The other 20 you still can use from your department standpoint, share during department meetings and so forth, and say, okay, we still have some improvement to do. But Renee didn't want a lot more than just the 20 entered in, because that's what the system is set up to be. Okay. The requirements, again, we have to make sure people know that it's a self-directed matrix. The staff are required to use this as a working document. Once you give out the new one in January to them, as soon as I get it to you, they should have it accessible to them. However you all want to do that. You know, you might have a filing cabinet that they can put them in. They can keep it in their locker. It's their ownership to keep responsibility for it. And then minimally on a quarterly basis, the CSLs or directors or whatever should be meeting with the individuals and going over it. And again, it should be expected that they bring it. If they don't, you shouldn't be meeting with them. Again, that's part of accountability and responsibility, because at the end of the year, you're validating that they accomplish those things. And if you haven't met with them and you can't validate, then you shouldn't be agreeing that they are at that level, because again, they're not taking responsibility and accountability for it. So meet with them so that by the end of December of this year, 2019, all you're going to have to do is, again, make a copy of that matrix, make a copy of their credentialing sheets and that addendum, and that's what you submit for their evaluation. It's done. It's not going to be this whole thing that's going around now, that buzz for the last couple months for people filling it out. It should be quite easy, because we're not going to be duplicating work. This is work that they're doing throughout the year. And then I do want to thank everyone. We did do some feedback sessions regarding it. We talked about definitions, so I did define some concepts like managing up, but that's part of the Service Excellence Handbook, and I would encourage you that if you do not have them, or that people don't understand what managing up means, that you call HR and get some customer service handbooks. It's all in there. It talks how you manage up different departments, how you manage up one another, etc. A concept came up about recognizing MSN or BSN in the matrix. Again, we already recognize individuals through the differentials that individuals get for BSN or MSN, but I would leave it up to the group to decide, is this something that we want to also give credit within the matrix? I can go either way. This is not my document. This is our document as a nursing perspective. So you need to all decide on that. I do know that really a lot of concern was on the length of the document, because it's so many pages, and it actually grew a few extra, I think, when I was adding clarification into it. People said maybe we can take all the attestations out and make it on a separate sheet. Should we pull out all the quality pieces on a separate sheet? Yeah, that will shorten it all. But again, how is that framework? Do you want it to be in those sections so it makes more sense, or not? Again, it's up to you how you want to do it. I know it's a lengthy document, mostly because we want people to have time to document and write in things in it and use it. So again, it doesn't matter to me if we want to try as is for one more year, and then again do some before the end of the next year, or this end of this year, get back together and say we'd rather change it or not. Like I said, I'm open.
Just as the document came out, I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like a career ladder where we used to have the binders and you document all the stuff in the binders. So as the packet came out, there's a lot of pages, but when you turn it in, there should be a lot more pages, because you're documenting and proving what you've done all year. So if you kind of think of it, sure, it's a long document if you sit down and look at it and try to fill it all out at once. But really, what you're trying to do with it, you should be adding more to it to prove that this is what I've accomplished this year. So.
Here are the definitions. Like I said, these are 3 that came up during those review sessions: the mentoring, managing up, service recovery. And again, I'd encourage you, if you don't have the Standards of Excellence and Customer Service Handbook, to get a copy from HR and have it available for your staff to review. And I think that's all I had on this. I did, again, have a copy of the scorecard, and I also have a copy of the matrix, where I can show you some of the things that we did change if you're interested. So this was mainly to kind of go over a basic and really answer your questions specific to the scorecard, because that's where our concentration needs to be on the present scorecard, because HR is going to be asking for those numbers soon. And I think I've gotten a couple more last minute feedback regarding the actual matrix. And I've got to make a last call. Anyone else have any other examples, suggestions, feedback? Because I need to get out the matrix to you, because we're ticking through and we're halfway through January, and your staff need to have access to it, because you're still going to need time to send it to the copy center. You do want to send it to the copy center to get printed. It makes a lot difference, because I try to do it in colors to make it a little bit easier and kind of highlight things in the red and so forth. So it'd be easier for you to send it to the copy center, and have a quick turnover from them. Any questions? David, did I answer most of your questions? Okay.
Sorry for being a pain.
No, that's okay.
The 0 that I was talking about was where you, on this drop-downs, some people don't consistently write on the whiteboards or communication boards. So that's one of the questions, and they can't get past that 1. So I need to give them a 0 for that piece.
I think what you need to do is have that conversation with them.
We have.
And say that this has to be done. And right now, we've left it as a 1, because they at least need to understand and be able to explain to you why it is. It is one of those, whether it's Press-Ganey or PRC, it's one of those ways that we can accomplish and improve our scores by using that communication board. And I think that they need to document on their matrix why they don't do it.
Sure, and that's where we're trying to get there, but on the matrix, I can't put the 0
Yeah.
score there.
Yeah.
Not that they're a 0 as a nurse, but for that section, to give them the 0, and that gives them a little bit more of, oh, shoot. The other thing is, on the matrix itself, is it possible to put the section scores at the bottom of the section?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I know what you're
It's a little
talking
confusing to
about.
put the score at the top and then get all the questions answered.
Say, take it out of here, it says this section
Right.
points,
Because I'm
actually
thinking, oh,
put
is that
it.
actually B or is that C's? And
Gotcha.
it gets confusing.
Okay. I can work on that. All right.
Email that when you're done.
I'm sorry?
Can you email it when you're done?
Email what?
That
The score sheet?
whole thing, what you just presented.
Oh, the PowerPoint? Sure. Sure. I'll send it out. I'll send it to Sharon and ask her to send it out, because I don't want to miss anyone, because I don't have everyone down. Tracy?
On the certifications, originally, I know in the larger document, it said 10 points per certification, then we had to change it to 5 or 10. Can you speak to that and just make sure the scoring's right in the new one?
Yes. In the new one, I did take off that we just said points will be awarded. It's not actually, when we do the math, Shiley's taught me a lot about statistics and math and challenges and all like that, but it's, if a person, just for this part, if a person has 1 certification, you give them a 5. If they have 2, they get 10. What it is that it's not an additional 10 points. If I added 10 to a 4.0, that would make it a 14 point, so it doesn't calculate out to 10. So Shiley has it set up that if you choose the 5, there's a conversion from that 5 that will add a half of a point to it. Go ahead, Shiley.
Yeah,
You
so
did
the
the
5
math.
actually adds to your total score 0.5. And 10 actually adds a 1.0 to your score.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. So for, oh, I gotta,
I'm sorry, what? You could get a 5? Technically, yes. But then you're at level 4 range, and so it becomes mute.
I remember, I know I pulled it off. Should be right. Can't remember where I put it, but I know I pulled it off and said that it's, additional points would be added.
Also, the only other clarification, and you clarified it for me the other day, so I want to make sure other people realize, you will make a copy for this for your records, but you won't make a copy to send to HR.
For this
For this time.
grading period,
Correct.
you do not have to send in the matrix that they are been working on. They just turn into you. Once you take that, enter in their score, just put that matrix in their file. Keep out the scoring sheets on each person for right now, because that'll make it easier for you to enter the data for HR. And then once you've done that, then you can put that scoring sheet in their file as well.
Cindy, also a question that you had asked about MSN and BSN being in the matrix. I would vote yes, because it gives a visual to the nurses who are not maybe thinking about that, but it's like, oh, I can get maybe some extra points.
What is it? What does the group want? What does everyone feel? I mean, we've talked about this for a long time when we talked about clinical ladder. We've talked about when we started the matrix years and years ago. The first introduction of it is they couldn't become a level 3 unless they had their BSN, and that created it. Then we said, okay, BSN is separate, and then they had to have their certification to be a 3. And then this year now, it's the certification adds additional points to it, but it's not a requirement to become a 3. Because remember, this is a pay for performance, how engaged I am. And being engaged and doing best practice and looking up the evidence and all like that, that will get you points in multiple components of this, but it wouldn't hold a person to that. So as a group, how many would like to see more reference to BSN as options of getting the points?
As we move as an organization towards a magnet, we need a plan to increase our percentage of BSNs, and this would be a good plan. Not only do we need a plan, we have to show that it worked. So I would vote yes.
So how many no? No, I'm not, this has nothing to do with the diff. This is just allowing them, just like we gave them points for their certification, we might be able to give them points if they have a BSN. So that's actually, they'll get points for both.
So you're saying point, not they can't be a level.
Correct.
Okay, then I vote that. Sorry.
I don't see a downside to it at all.
There's no downside. It's actually adding to those, because there's a lot of people saying, well, I worked hard to get my BSN. Remember that we went through that. We got all these people to go back to school, and then we took it off, and they were like, why did you make me go back to school? And then we did the same thing for the certification. Okay, so I've got to think, are you wanting it as extra points like the certification?
Yes.
All right, Charlie, we got some math to work.
It's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement. It's just giving you, I wish I could
It's
find
not a requirement, but it would be nice to add like the certification. They get maybe 5 for BSN and a 10 for masters, which would be a 0.5 and a 1. That would make a huge difference, I think. What do y'all think? We can vote again now that I understand. I was the only one that said no. I didn't want it to be. I don't understand the drama. I think I know.
Here it is. I have, it just says additional points will be awarded for each approved and maintained certification. That's how I changed it. So I took the terminology of the 10 points, because my math and Shiley's math isn't in line, and Shiley's making me more in line with the appropriate math.
Can 15 points be an option as well? We have some nurses that have 3 certifications. Or is there going to just be a cap at 10?
Um,
I think they should be able to get both. If they have a certification and a master's, they should be able to get 5 for each.
well, we'll have to redo the math because we can't throw people way off the 4. Because what it's going to do is our calculation caps it at a 4.0, which is the highest you can get. So what it might do is instead of getting 0.5 for one certification, it might be a 0.25. So we're lowering it, just so you know, because the math has to equal out to 4, or 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 3. So that's where Shiley comes in to make my math straight. We can add it in, but again, either we're stretching the points or there's a no additional points that they're going to get in the math. Whether they have, if you get a 5, you still get a 0.5. If you get a 10, you get a 1.0. But if you get a 3 and we give a 15, it's still a 1.0. I don't know.
Can y'all look at the math and then bring it back next week?
Yep.
And the other option is just say you can't go over a 4. I mean, you may get 1.5 points or 1 point, but you can't get above a 4.
Right.
So, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, sorry. Leaving out the 40% concerns me, thinking ahead to next year and how that will impact our scores next year, and will that drop people? And I understand that the scores aren't great right now, and that's why we're omitting them, but do we project that they're going to improve so much that it's going to help our scores, or is it going to take someone from a level 3 to a level 2 if they work just as hard in the next year? 40% is a huge number to just leave out.
I think we're partially omitting them because we don't have accurate data because we switched from to Press Gaming.
That's correct.
Correct, but it's...
I think I had this long discussion with the whole surgery team, so you bring a good point. The concern is if we do all this and leave out the 40%, and someone rates a 3 this year, but next year, because we add in a 40% weighting can be pretty impactful, and then they were a 3, and this year they're a 2. Is that going to hurt? Well, hopefully the concept is that we're in this together. We've got to work and drive these quality metrics. Only we as bedside nurses collectively can make a change to it. That's why we allowed you to see what it could do so they can see it.
Should we show that? I mean, should that just be something that we show? I think they need to know how it will impact their score.
That's why we sent it out to you and said, do your score, what we're turning in, but at the same time, pull it up and say, hey, this was your score. If we had had these quality metrics, this is what it could have done to you.
And we will have those quality metrics next year. I think it's very important that the staff knows that. I don't want this to create mistrust in the staff and then work hard to fulfill all these goals and then drop.
But at least they have the full, even though we have been working on these same 7 for the past 3 years, okay, which technically we could have held them. Unfortunately, we just felt that because we didn't have access to it for a while and they just finally got everything squared away, it wouldn't have been fair because that's what they would have said. Well, we didn't see it. Why didn't you show it? Now the expectation with everyone and I've just I spent a lot of time with Mike and Eric about every director will have their director card, and in it we've talked about this. So every month when he sends out your director scorecard, it will have all 7 of these quality metrics, and you should be posting that somewhere in your department so the staff can see where they are. And then every month, if we get the scorecard fixed, that you can, when you meet with them on a quarterly basis, you can go ahead and say, as of today, this is where you are. And include that where they are from their performance as well as the quality metrics. So we'll get that score sheet for next year also ready to go with the actual matrix.
I just want to back up to the previous comments about the education and the certifications. I think it's important to remember why we're doing the matrix. It's really to drive performance on the unit-based level and the organization-wide, not necessarily to drive personal, performance as far as education. And I agree that we need to be magnet, but, from an HR standpoint, we reward somebody with a differential. But if we drive up, their points on a system where somebody's a level 2 because they're a master's and they've got a couple of certifications and they minimally perform on your unit and have a really bad attitude, that could put them in a level 4 very easily. And then you've got some people really trying hard who maybe are not that educated, who just got out of school. It's going to be really hard for them to achieve level 4 status, but they're really performing to the level of the matrix that you need to be. So in order to protect the matrix, I think we need to consider that, what that would actually be doing to the matrix by adding in additional certifications and all this education to it by driving up those points. Just something to consider.
Valid point, Angie. So we need to take this in consideration. Yes, it's nice to say we're going to give credit, but is that going to, change the scoring to the point where they're not doing anything because they know they're going to get additional points just from that, and then they don't do anything with it?
And that's the shift from, so much focus on, personal growth versus quality, which we should be focused on. So that's why there's so much emphasis on the quality piece. To drive that, I'm not just coming to work to punch the clock, do my 12 hours and go home.
And in essence, it would drive down it would make it harder for everybody else. So if you keep adding in additional certifications and the degrees, you have to do something with the rest of that math. And so it's going to make it harder for everybody else to achieve level 4, not having the same. Does that make sense?
And I would think you could do it for obtaining your BSN or obtaining your MSN, but to give you credit for a BSN forever, I mean, you could have gotten your BSN 30 years ago and never done another thing. Is that the same as somebody who's keeping their CCRN up every 2 years? I mean, on the points it would be, but in the real world, does that translate the same?
Agreed. Because if they're in the actual program for their BSN, let's say, hopefully, usually with these programs, they are having to do projects and whatever, which will, hopefully they'll use it for their unit or service line or whatever, and they'll get credit within that by developing some type of educational program or whatever. So they're already getting credit if they're in school too, so they're already getting some additional information. But once they get it, what else are these people doing? We've got people that, you're right, that have been a BSN for years and they're not doing anything. We have to choose as a profession to continue to be lifelong learners or not. Yeah, Charlie?
So in my prior job at HCA, whatever certifications you had were not included in any performance. You can have a paper degree from University of Shiley online and a bachelor's at that, and it doesn't really translate to, quality or productivity. So this is the only place I've ever seen where that it actually adds in something.
I don't disagree. I think there's value to it. I think we want our nurses to achieve that. But I think we just need to be careful because we don't want to dilute the math so much in the matrix to make it impossible for those nurses to, especially our newer nurses, to come out and say, well, it's going to be impossible for me to make level 4 status because, I got to do X, Y, Z and, 100 times 10. And I mean, it gets so hard. It's overwhelming to them now. Whereas you have a nurse, we all have nurses that have been out on the unit for a long time that are really high performers, that are well educated, who can meet level 4 status without their education. Well, we all have younger nurses that are really kind of struggling to meet that along. And we all have also probably some nurses that have been out there who are very highly educated, who probably skate by with a real bad attitude and bring down everybody too. So we just need to be careful.
I think this needs to be, sorry, Angie, I thought you were done. I think this needs to be talked about in maybe another venue or in another set meeting about this, because I think there's a lot of thoughts that are all accurate, and we don't want to dilute the matrix, but we also don't want to reward the ones that have gone back that we have pushed. I mean, we've had probably 50 nurses go back for their bachelor's because we've encouraged them to do it. And that's a lot of time. And yes, our units are really benefiting from that because they're coming to us and saying, hey, I have this project for school. What can I do? Can I do this? Which is going into this matrix. So I don't also want to not be supportive of that. So that's why I think this, maybe we need to set up another time and people that want to come and talk about this specific thing and whether it should go in the matrix. Just a thought. Because we could, you know,
we can debate it back and
we could debate it for another hour.
Before I just want to show on this section here, we went ahead and had a discussion during one of the feedback, and we are making this instructor where if they're not an instructor for any of these things, they can't be a 3 or a 4. And again, we're in this together collectively as nurses, so maybe your department doesn't need someone that can do BLS, but maybe Erlanger North does, or East Campus, or someone else does need that. So we have said that this, again, we're looking at this matrix as a system-wide approach to nursing and how we can support one another through. So you have a choice of what you need within, but they have to at least be something that will benefit the system. And if you're not too sure and you don't need anything, check with Jill, because she does need some staff. So in order for them to get to be a 3 for this particular section, they have to become an instructor in something. Any other questions regarding the actual use of the scoring sheet? Make sure you're actually using without the quality scores when you're doing it, but do share with your staff if the quality metrics were in there. I can take final calls on any additional ideas or suggestions for clarification for the matrix, and especially my lovely surgery group. If you have anything, I would appreciate it to make sure I guess we didn't get to finish our complete discussion, but yes.
Do you have an idea of when the final is coming out for next year?
I'm going to have to probably say last call by Friday if everyone, and then hopefully I get Monday or Tuesday out. I'll send it out, and then it's going to be up to you all to send it to the copy center to get your copy. So I will have to send it to Sharon and ask Sharon to send it out to make sure everyone receives it. But any last calls for changes by Friday, so I can get it out to you next week. And hopefully, I lost Shiley, so I'm going to try to make sure we can make the corrections to the scoring sheet for next year too. Thank you.